Padre Pio often spoke as though the boundary between this life and the next was thinner than most people realized. He never used the language of mystics or scholars when he said this. He simply lived in a way that suggested he was aware of a reality most people pass by without noticing. And he treated every prayer for the dead as something living, something heard, something answered in ways hidden from ordinary sight. This certainty did not come from theological speculation or long study. It came from encounters he never sought and responsibilities he never asked for, but accepted with the same quiet obedience that shaped every part of his vocation. He did not speak as someone fascinated by mysteries. He spoke as a man who carried them. One of the earliest accounts came from fellow friars who noticed how suddenly his attention would change during prayer. They said that on certain evenings he would pause, turn slightly, as though someone had entered the room. There was never dramatic movement, never surprise, never fear. Only a gentle shift in posture, the way one might turn toward a person who needed something. He never dramatized these moments. He simply listened. Later, when someone asked discreetly why he would sometimes stop mid-prayer and tilt his head as though acknowledging a presence, he gave the simplest answer he could. Souls sometimes came asking for prayer, not in visible form, not with voices anyone else could hear, but with a clarity he could not ignore. He did not offer descriptions of what they looked like or how he perceived them. He never speculated about the mechanics of such encounters. He stated only what he experienced, that the dead were not distant and that the mercy of God reached further than anyone imagined. For him, this was not a claim about the afterlife. It was simply part of the life he lived. Witnesses at San Giovanni Rotondo later spoke about a moment they never forgot. A friar remembered a man who arrived at the monastery late one night asking for Padre Pio. He seemed ordinary, quiet, almost hesitant, as though unsure whether he should have come. When he was brought into the sacristy, Padre Pio looked at him with a seriousness that left a deep impression on those who were present. They spoke only briefly. No raised voices, no emotion. A simple, private exchange. Then, the visitor left the monastery as quietly as he had entered. The friar, puzzled, asked who the man had been. Padre Pio answered with gentleness, not to startle him, but to explain what was needed. The man had died years earlier in a fire. He had come seeking a mass. Padre Pio offered the mass the next morning. He did not mention the event again. He never used stories like this to astonish anyone or to draw attention to himself. For him, such moments were not proofs or signs. They were responsibilities, reminders that love extends beyond the grave and that God allows the living and the dead to help one another in ways that unfold quietly and without spectacle. When someone later asked how such a thing could be possible, he did not attempt to explain. He simply said that prayer moves freely where we cannot go, that mercy is never confined to a single world. What seems impossible to us is natural to God. Another moment revealed a similar truth from a different direction. Padre Pio was once found weeping quietly after Mass. A brother, seeing the tears, assumed he was suffering from the physical wounds that marked his body. He tried to console him, offering the kind of comfort one gives someone in pain. Padre Pio explained, with difficulty, that the tears were not because of bodily suffering. They were for a soul he had been praying for. A soul who, as he understood it, had just entered peace. He did not describe how he knew this. He did not claim a vision or an interior message. He only said that God had allowed him to sense the result of long-endured prayer, and that the mercy given was far greater than anything he himself had asked for. Those close to him said this was how he approached all things related to the dead. He prayed for them with the same urgency as if they were standing before him in need of comfort. Not because he feared for them, but because he trusted grace to reach them. These accounts lead naturally to a quieter understanding. For Padre Pio, prayers for the dead were not attempts to change God's mind, not attempts to bargain with heaven, not acts of fear or superstition. They were offerings, openings through which God's mercy could move without resistance in the soul of someone who could no longer speak, no longer choose, no longer repair what had been damaged in life. He believed the dead carried a longing that the living could help fulfill, not by force or persuasion, but by love that continues beyond the grave. A love that remembers. A love that refuses to let death end a relationship that was never meant to end. Throughout his life, he wrote and spoke about the relief and light that souls receive when the living remember them. He never claimed to know the full nature of that relief. He did not pretend to map the afterlife or describe its workings. He simply trusted what he had witnessed again and again. Prayer has consequence beyond sight. And he also understood the sorrow that follows from forgetfulness. Padre Pio often said that the greatest suffering of the poor souls was not God's fire. It was human forgetfulness. The quiet abandonment that happens when the living move forward without remembering those who still await purification and healing. He did not say this to frighten anyone. He said it to remind people that love becomes incomplete when it stops at death. There are relationships still waiting to be reconciled, forgiveness still waiting to be asked, gratitude still waiting to be expressed, and prayer can carry these things when words are no longer possible. He once told a spiritual daughter that those who pray for the dead will find unexpected mercy at their own judgment. Not because prayer purchases favor, but because God does not forget compassion shown to a soul in need. Padre Pio never presented this as a formula. He spoke as a man who had seen that mercy returns to those who give it. There is also deep consolation in the testimonies preserved about him. Many of those who recounted these moments were simple people, men and women with no interest in exaggeration. They spoke plainly, sometimes even reluctantly, because they did not want their words misunderstood. And yet, their stories all carried the same message. No prayer for the dead is ever wasted. Even the smallest offering, a brief intention, a whispered remembrance, a candle lit in silence, can become a vessel of mercy poured into a place where healing is still unfolding. This means something profoundly hopeful. It means that love does not stop when someone disappears from our sight. It means that misunderstandings, unfinished reconciliations, and old wounds do not remain frozen forever. It means that hope reaches further than death allows us to imagine. Padre Pio never tried to persuade the world of his experiences. He lived them quietly. He prayed, and the souls came. He offered Mass, and he believed God used those offerings in ways invisible but real. His faith was not based on what he could see. It was based on what he had come to trust through years of intercession. God wastes nothing. Not prayers whispered in grief. Not memories carried in silence. Not the longing to help someone who can no longer help himself. This trust shaped the rhythm of his days. It shaped the way he approached every intention brought to him, every loved one commended to his prayer, every soul whose name was written on a scrap of paper and placed before him at the altar. He once said that God does not ask us to understand the mysteries of mercy, only to participate in them through love. As he grew older, those who lived near him said his relationship with the dead seemed almost woven into his daily life. Some nights he would ask for extra time in the chapel, saying simply that there were many souls who needed help. At other times, he would offer his sufferings for those who had no one to pray for them. He believed that even the smallest act offered with love could become a source of comfort for someone waiting for full union with God. He carried these responsibilities without pride. He never described himself as chosen or special. He often told others that God would grant them similar graces if they prayed with the same persistence and humility. He believed the relationship between the living and the dead was part of God's design. Not a privilege for mystics, but a consequence of love that refuses to end. As the years passed, people continued bringing him the names of deceased family members. Sometimes they came with hope, sometimes with fear, sometimes with guilt over things left unsaid. He accepted each name with the same seriousness, the same tenderness. He knew that every name carried a whole story, memories, regrets, unfinished conversations, gratitude never expressed. And he believed prayer could reach into all of it. It is the same truth that opened this story, a truth he returned to again and again because it shaped the deepest part of his spiritual life. Prayer does not end when we finish speaking it. It continues its work quietly, faithfully, in the places where mercy is still needed. For Padre Pio, that was enough. It did not need to be dramatic. It did not need to be understood. It only needed to be offered. And so he offered it every day of his life, trusting that God would carry it the rest of the way.